My name is Clarice Charlie Hubbard, and I am with the Intertribal Council of Nevada. I am Tamok Shoshone tribal member based out of Battle Mountain, Nevada. Does anybody know where Battle Mountain, Nevada is? Yeah? Okay. So I'm a tribal member there from the Western Shoshone tribe. And I do presentations. Well, first of all, I'm a little bit confused as far as who my audience is tonight. So maybe I should kind of start there with you guys to get an idea of who I am presenting to, why you're taking this class, and we'll start from there. We can just briefly go around the room.
Hi, Christine.
Tell me your name.
This is Brenda with
what you do, and why you're
we
taking this
have
class.
Clarice Charlie here.
Yeah, my name's Joe,
the
and my wife and I
Indian
live in
tribe
Truckee,
in Nevada, and she's going to go over
and we're just
services
really
for
interested
victims of
in
domestic
trying to save
violence
the lives.
within
We
their
really like
tribe.
their mission and understand
Can you see
what's
Brian?
the
Can you
work
see
that
okay?
they're doing. We just want to learn more about it and
Perfect.
possibly volunteer to see.
So
if we
this
can
is the volunteer training,
Yes.
correct? Okay, good. I didn't know because it was at a college, so I wasn't sure if we had other college students, like if this was a requirement for that, so thank you.
And I'm Bonnie, his wife, and we're both retired now, but I was a psychologist.
Oh, okay, great.
My name is Danny. I came to this class because my girlfriend was actually taking it, and it's kind of just lines up with my path in life. So it was just another experience to come and learn
I
and
love
share.
that. Thank you. I'll go with that.
Hi, my name is Becca. Oh, I just put this out. And I'm taking this class because I'm interested in going into social work or maybe psychology. And I just wanted to learn and get some experience in that field before I started applying to programs and things, make sure. I already went through half a master's program in nursing and realized I did not care about anyone's physical problems and giving them medicines or anything like that. I just really wanted to sit there and listen to them after I did my clinicals in shock trauma, so they were life changed when they woke up. And so I already learned the hard way what I don't want to do, so I kind of want to check this out first before, just to make sure. So, thanks.
My name's Eric. I just live in the area. This is a free class that I saw that I thought would be good to have for myself, as well as multiple people in my life right now that could benefit from some type of intervention. So.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Danielle. I started in the booklet and went, that looks interesting. And I know about Tahoe Cyclones. So I was thinking if I could do something and volunteer, what would I do? I'm like, this seems kind of cool. So.
Okay, yeah, perfect, thank you.
Hi, my name is Reina Brambilla, and I'm taking this class because I work with the families. I'm home visitor, and sometimes many of my families need support in many areas, and I think this class is perfect to show them. Yeah.
And I'm Tanya, and I'm a family advocate for 2 preschools, and I work with a lot of families and a lot of moms, and I want to take this class because I can better support a lot of my moms in that program, so that's why I'm interested in this course.
Thank you.
My name is Greta, and I am a feng shui consultant, and working with a client last month who mentioned she was having suicidal thoughts, and so I'm doing this to better prepare for the work that I'm doing and increase sensitivity to crisis mentality, and more helping the victims, than feeling like an activist these days. So, and it was free.
Great. Thank you, Greta.
Sure.
And it looks like we have somebody online. I have never presented with somebody online, so I may forget you from time to time. Just like wave me over. So if you want to just introduce yourself for me.
Yeah, sure. I'm Kristen, and I am going to be a child therapist at Tahoe Safe Alliance.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for those brief introductions. I really like the mix of participants and the personal experiences, wanting to change fields and wanting to be able to improve your quality of services in your current positions, or just, you know, being here and wanting to volunteer and help others in need. So that's great. Last question before I go in. How many of you guys have experience in working within Native American communities, or have knowledge about Native American populations? Just raise a hand. Okay. 1, 2. And I always like to ask that because sometimes my presentations can be repetitive, or they could bring a lot of knowledge. So I just want to be able to go through thoroughly of what I can share, or, you know, pass up things that maybe you guys already know. So I'm not really sure how far along you guys are in your training, but we'll touch on that later. So who am I? My name is Clarice Charlie Hubbard, and I am a Western Shoshone tribal member. And I am enrolled in the Battle Mountain Band of Timuc Tribes, which is based in near Elko, Nevada. I know you guys are in California, but you guys are right on the border of Nevada. In the past, I've been invited to do presentations to this class to try to help bring awareness to our culture, some of the differences, some of the barriers that we face, and just help people understand that, you know, we're still here. And in fact, where you guys reside, we're neighboring communities to many different tribal communities, tribal members, especially, you know, in Nevada, you have the Washoe tribe, the Shoshone tribe, and the Paiute tribe all spread out through Nevada, but mainly right along the Tahoe border in California and Nevada border, it's the Washoe tribal community. So I think, so they have invited me to come and share a little bit about my culture and my work in the field. I do have a map of Nevada with me, and maybe Brenda could print that out. It's kind of tricky. I thought that we had printed it out in color, but they're numbered. The tribal reservations in Nevada, there's 27 of them. And you wouldn't think that. There's a list on the back, and it kind of shows you through the numbers where they're located on the map. So just to keep that in mind, just for your reference, I am a social worker. I got my bachelor's of social degree from the University of Nevada. I've been in the social work field, in the family violence prevention field, primarily sexual assault prevention, domestic violence prevention, for 20 years. I started out just like you guys are today. I was 19 years old, doing the crisis line training, becoming certified to, you know, enhance my career and goals of what I wanted to do. But the unique part about that is I am a survivor of childhood domestic violence. So a brief story about my life is I grew up on the Bishop Paiute Reservation, Big Pine Paiute Reservation. I don't know if you guys know where that community is. My stepdad was a Paiute man, 6'3", and my mom is about 5'3" and has always been around 120 pounds. My stepdad was much older than my mom, went off and fought in Vietnam War, came back with some concerning issues, PTSD, all those things that come back with people from the Vietnam War. And we suffered 10 years, my mom and I, of severe domestic abuse. And in fact, I was 13 years old when we left my dad. He was extremely a dangerous man, and he would have killed us. I remember I have a memory that goes all the way back to when I was 3 years old of trauma. I can sit here and that's a whole nother session on my personal life, but I do share my story. But to give you an idea, when I was 13 years old, we left. We called the Wild Iris Family Services program, which is in Bishop, California. They came to my school and they did this presentation, child assault prevention presentation on domestic violence, where to go if you need help. I seen it on the hotline on TV one day and they said, Mom, we need to call that. We need to call that. We need to leave like right now because tension was building and we knew something was going to happen. He made my mom sleep outside. It was a Saturday. And on Friday night, he had made her sleep outside on the night before. And he did stuff like that. So, so that day we had left with my little sister, myself, and my older stepsister, and my stepdad had my little brother at the time. When we left, we called an advocate, and an advocate met us behind the local police station. And Bishop is very small, maybe like Truckee. Everybody knows everybody, and we were not safe there. So they let us get into their car and they took us, and they hid us in a motel. Several days later, I'll make this long story short. Several days later, my mom, they talked her into getting a restraining order. Well, in California, you get a restraining order, and it's good for 3 years. Sheriff's office delivered it to him on the reservation, and he went out, and of course he had guns and weapons, and my mom told them, he's dangerous, he has guns and weapons. Later on that night, they called us and told us that they shot him, because it was actually really embarrassing as a 13-year-old, because our home was on the Channel 2 news in LA. They had to bring in the SWAT team because he was threatening suicide. But he was threatening suicide on himself, so when the police got there, he started shooting at the police. So everybody got called in. It was a big standoff. My grandpa, who's now deceased, he pointed out to us, years later, he said if John wanted to shoot one of those officers, he would have taken him down. He was hoping for suicide. He was hoping they would kill him because my dad was a sniper in the Vietnam War, and he had medals of honor for being a sniper and did the job that he needed to do. So we thought about that for a long time. Like, yeah, probably right. So that happened. He went away to prison, and that was our break. That was when we actually became free. My mom got my brother back, but then because she was so controlled all of those years, she kind of went out and did her own thing. Eventually, she had this opportunity of being able to live life and have fun. Of course, I was 13. I had a younger brother and sister. I was much more mature and responsible at my age. I was like the family savior, so she depended on me a lot. We had everything from horses to cars and money. My dad was a provider. He was a minor, and going to nothing. We had to get an apartment. We lived in the shelter for like 6 months, and then we found an apartment, and we went on TANF. Food stamps. That's when we had paper checks for like WIC and food stamps, and I would get them every month and go shop because my mom was gone a lot, and she was downtown at the bars, and so that was kind of my upbringing involving domestic violence. And when I started figuring out where I want to go, what I wanted to do, when I was taking this hotline training, the sheriff's department came in and did a presentation just like I'm giving you guys. But they used my family as an example because it's such a small community and it was a big deal what had happened. I'm like, it touched home. I had some weird feelings about it because it only happened, 8 or 9 years before then, but he was one of the responding officers. They talked about my family. It was just really weird. It was really awkward. But that's a little bit about my own personal experience, and I always like to share that because I feel like it's important. We all have a past. We all have stories in our life that we learn from, and it's important that we share those and get those out, and I like to share them with my audience so they kind of have an idea of where I'm coming from, the experiences that I have, and that I'm not just up here, talking like I don't know what I'm talking about. So that's my story in a brief nutshell. So I moved to Reno. I started working for Wild Iris Family Services, actually. The hotline allowed me to do some volunteer work, and I got in as a crisis counselor, 21, and then a few years later I moved to Reno, and I got a job with the Committee to Aid Abused Women. So I've always been in the field of crisis intervention counseling, being able to listen, learning how to be empathetic, but I really believe that those skills are all inside of us, and we just need a little bit more training outside to master those skills and qualities. And then after 4 years with Committee to Aid Abused Women, I started working for the Intertribal Council of Nevada. Is anybody familiar with that? Okay, how it is, it's a consortium basically of different programs. So we have a WIC program, child care assistance, a domestic violence program. We have child care assistance, Head Start program, elder program. But what our programs are designed for is we assist all of the Nevada tribes. California has one, the Intertribal Council of California. So they go and assist the California tribes in California, and our job is to oversee and ensure services to the Nevada tribes. So my role and my position is as Intertribal Council of Nevada is I'm the program director. We provide emergency services to Native American families, men and women, emergency shelter, food and hygiene, because like I said, I don't know how far you are in your learning sessions, but when families leave, usually they up and leave with nothing. And a lot of programs are funded by grants. We are very fortunate and blessed to be funded by the Family Violence Prevention Grant, which focuses on Native American families, but we serve pretty much everybody. And so another part of my job is going out to these 27 communities and providing outreach and education awareness. What you're going to learn tonight and what you're going to see tonight, for those of you that may not know a little bit of history about the Native American culture, is that we have a lot of issues in our culture. We're at the top of the list of everything: homicide, suicide, substance abuse, alcoholism, fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, like everything you can think of, poverty levels. We're at the very top, and we'll get into that soon. So when we go out into the communities, a lot of those community members have only been exposed to unhealthy relationships, just like I was. What is a healthy relationship? They don't know. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So that's who I am. Got a little brief history of my past. Explained what we do at the Intertribal Council of Nevada. I do have brochures. I have business cards. And then I do have a sign-in sheet that I'll pass around later for you guys to sign in on. So we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, so I kind of went over that.
Who is the picture of right there?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So those are my grandparents. And his name is Tommy Charlie and my grandma Alice Charlie. And my grandpa was a rancher. This picture was taken in Austin, Nevada, and it's the middle part of Nevada. And that's where my grandpa was from, the Reese River Reservation, which they refer to. You'll see Reese River on here. You'll see Yamba community, very small community. That's where he was raised, out in those areas, outside of the Austin area. My grandma is Shoshone Bannock, and she is a tribal member with the Fort Hall Indian Reservation in Idaho, near Pocatello, Idaho. And we're going to talk a little bit about her soon. My grandpa passed away in 1989. They raised me from when I was just a baby. My grandma was a caretaker, and my grandpa was a provider. He was a minor. So they raised me until I was about 5. And then my mom took me to Big Pine to start kindergarten and all that good stuff. But they're probably like the most influential people in my life. And so I always like to share a little bit about who I am, where I come from, and that's where. My grandma She had a very tragic life growing up, a lot of trauma. She was sent to Indian boarding school. Are you guys familiar with that? Some? No? Okay. So the Stewart, we have a really close boarding school to you guys, and I really highly encourage at some point, if you get the opportunity to go and visit that. They're doing great things there, and they're a lot of history, a lot of things that happened there. We'll learn about that in a little bit. So she was sent as a young child to go to boarding school, where a lot of things happened there, where they were forced to speak English. They were forced to basically forget their culture. So my grandma and two other girls had run away from the school, and they ran away to Elko, Nevada. And there's a tiny little speck called the South Fork Indian Reservation outside of Elko. That's where they ran to, and those 3 girls, they enrolled themselves into Elko High School, and they graduated from Elko High School by themselves. And that's where she met my grandpa, because of course he was ranching, working in the mines, and doing those sort of things there. So thank you for asking.
Did you say the person that was it your stepdad that did it? What happened to your biologic dad?
Oh, I never knew him. My mom was a single mom.
Okay.
Yep. As far as I know, he just wasn't a nice man. So my mom actually.
Was your stepdad Paiute also?
He was. Yeah. Paiute and Shoshone.
And your mom was Shoshone?
My mom is Shoshone. Yep.
Thanks.
Good questions. Thank you. I love interaction. So again, I think I covered all of that. Oh, we also have an emergency response program, because our tribal communities are so rural that if there was like an immediate danger type of situation thing happened, an earthquake, something like that, this program has the capability to alert these tribal communities. So we have one of those. Let's see. Okay, now we're going to get into the root of it. So, what is historical trauma among Native American people? Raise your hand if you want to take a guess.
Displacement of all of their lands and genocide and destruction of buffalo herd, which numbered 32 million. So basically their food source was taken away. When they were granted reservations by the U.S. government, the government then reneged on all of the reservation treaties and pushed them from those into much smaller reservations. And generally, whenever there was any opportunity to try to meet, a massacre would happen. And I'd say about the most unkind treatment that one human could possibly thrust on another.
Right.
And I'm sorry for that.
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
Well, I mean, he kind of hit on all of it. Like, how far are we going to go back? Yeah, it's like the same thing. You know, most of my exposure to it's coming through books I read, like that, but especially here in this area, like I read a book, Black Elk Speaks, which is all about the tribes in this area and the way that everything was like reneged on it. Everything was live. They were handed all kinds of things that was stripped from them constantly, left and right. You know, like kept taking more and more. So.
Right.
But I didn't know if you were asking about that or now what goes on the reservations amongst families.
No, we're gonna get
backlash.
into that. You're right on track. So.
I think the cultural assimilation, like you were saying, being made to speak English, pulled away from their lifestyle, which, you know, empowered spirit and all that stuff that was just crushed over time, and devaluing the things that tribal cultures value, like, you know, the planet and stuff like that. That's kind of more down to earth type way of living.
Yes. You guys did amazing on that. Anybody else before I move on?
The other thing that's pretty significant was that the First Nation didn't have immune systems that could basically tolerate the viruses that settlers brought. So between that, them basically trying to inculcate them or assimilate them into the settlers' culture created a host of problems as well that then started dividing even the tribes themselves. So I would basically say, I'm not sure that there's anything that happened was done in a way that was humane.
Right.
So basically, they weren't treated like human beings.
Exactly.
There was massacres too,
Uh-huh.
like just the ghost dances, like when and white men didn't know what they were doing and thought they were trying to call like spirits things, and started shooting women and children and everything when there was
Right.
not all the warriors had already been killed. It was like it kept going on and on till it was like almost a extinction, you know, like
Right.
it was almost like they were trying to wipe out their
Yeah.
own, like kept trying to, you know, remove the blood,
Mhm.
like cover the stains.
Exactly.
You know?
Assimilation. You guys did a really good job talking about that. I have a couple video clips, and because we started a little late, I'm hoping that we get through them. But they're very informative, and they talk about everything that you guys just touched on. But this is going to focus on the boarding schools. Basically, what our older generations have suffered, and you're going to see firsthand. I mean, this video is a pretty amazing video. It's I also have a map of the boarding schools here in the state. I'm going to pass those out, but the one I'm going to point out and the one they're talking about is up in Minnesota. And these people, these indigenous people, most of them come from Canada. So in Canada, they're called reserves. They're not called reservations or colonies. You have reserves up there. So a lot of the Native American children were stripped down from the reserves in Canada and more over to the east, and they were just sent there. So they're going to talk a little bit about that and the experiences they went through in this video. But it's a pretty powerful video. If somebody can dim the lights for me. And let's see.
The left one.
Ten Little Indians. That's a song that was counting dead Indians back on the trails when they would kill Indians.
See all these little kids in uniform, and we'd be wondering how come they're like that. We weren't dressed like that, but these little kids were.
I remember being younger, growing up on the reservation, and being told, don't trust white people, don't listen to them. You never told why.
The government schools are constantly being built and hospitals added. We bring them in, clean them up, and start them on their way to civilization.
I would ask social services and human services audience, how many people know about residential boarding schools? How many people here do? This never makes it into the history books. This is never talked about.
Why did those schools get started, and who started them, and what was the rationale behind it?
And the first general policy was the only good Indian was a dead Indian, that we needed to be killed, exterminated, eradicated. Once they realized that's a little bit more difficult to do, is to have mass genocide of a population, the policies changed from killing to killing the Indian and saving the man. There's a General Pratt who was well famous and documented for using those words to kill the Indian and save the man, and that we are subhuman and that our ways are savage and we need to be civilized. Well, in the governments in Canada and the United States followed that policy up until the 1980s in one form or another.
There is a boarding school far, far away where we get mush and milk 3 times a day. Oh, how the huskies run when they hear their dinner bell. Oh, how the huskies run 3 times a day. Like I say, I went to the mush hall when I was 4 years old. I was there for 9 years, and once in a while we'd come home in summertime, but not all the time. When the counselors came and told my dad that he couldn't raise us properly, we were at the mush hole 1 week and our heads were full of bugs.
Well, there's a lot of sad times, but I mean, like, I didn't get like angry and have any resentment until after I got out. Because I didn't know, like, from 5.5 to 16, they just thought it was just like a normal upbringing. Like, to not have no parents and stuff like that. So that's, and after I got out, and then they thought, well, this is the way they were supposed to be treating us.
I think my mother couldn't take care of us because our father was into alcohol. Me and my sister, we started there in 1945. I was 5 years old at the time.
We had all our hair cut off. We were made baldies. We were really bald. And that wasn't a very good feeling to have. And they used to call us mush hole baldies. That's what the kids on the reserve used to call us.
Well, we can go in now. I mean, this is going to take like all day, eh? Jeez.
We were taken to the hospital to get checked out for nits and whatever, I guess that was, you know. Well, they checked us out, you know. Then they split us. The school was split in age group and by the boys and girls. Boys were on one side, the girls were on one side. And they went from the lower age up to high school level.
My mom was going to walk out here and go out this door. And at 5.5, my sister tells me that I grabbed my mom's leg, and you know, of course we were all just crying. The whole 4 of us were just crying, like, you know, because my mom was going to leave us here. So I grabbed my mom's leg and, well, crying and that, and just kind of like hollering like, "Ma, don't leave me," like, you know. So, but anyway, like while that was going on, like the supervisor came over and just kind of grabbed me and took me off my mom's leg, and then my mom just walked out, and I never seen her for those 10 years that I was here. She never come to see me once. I don't know why.
They took my brother away to where he was supposed to stay, and my sister, she just went on her own. I was with most of the 4 and 5-year-olds. We didn't go to school because we were too young.
Yet, through the agencies of the government, they are being rapidly brought from their state of comparative savagery and barbarism to one of civilization.
When we used our language, at that young age too, you know, we were just learning. So they used to wash our mouth out with soap. They would take the whole bunch of us and march us to the shower, coal shower, and they'd throw us in there and beat us along the way. And that was a routine thing, I guess, I don't know. But that taught us, you know.
They'd throw us in this dark press room where they kept all our Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, and they'd throw Rosemary and I in there and tell us the rats were going to get us. But I didn't know then why I was being thrown in there, and I used to wonder, what did I do? And I would cry, and Rosemary would cry, and we cried and cried for hours in there, not knowing why we were in there. And they'd take us out. And when I did get to learn a little bit of English, I knew then they were throwing us in there because we wouldn't speak English. And I must have been stubborn right from the day I was born, because I thought to myself, I'll never speak English either. You want me to speak English? I won't speak English. So I didn't speak at all for 2 whole years, because I figured if I spoke Indian, I'd get a licking. And if I spoke English, then it would be against everything that I stood for. And so I didn't speak at all.
But today they all speak English, and some have taken business courses, home economics, and other higher training.
Took us into another room down there, and maybe down in the playroom, we took all our clothes off and we put the clothes of the school on. Yeah, and they give us a number. So my number was like 48, and my brother was 36.
My family was the state-run institute, and the nickname for the Thomas Indian School is Salem. And Salem was derived from asylum. And you know what an asylum is. It's for crazy people. So we were thought of as being crazy, I guess.
They were just considered bad people, bad children, but they weren't bad children, okay? They were placed there for so many different reasons, but not because of any kind of delinquency on their part. They were just considered bad people, bad children, but they weren't bad children, okay? They were placed there for so many different reasons, but not because of any kind of delinquency on their part. But that is not how they were treated.
We went from washing up in the morning, and they marched us to the chow hall where we ate. Everything was routine, just like the military.
One of the superintendents during the time that my mother was there actually came from correctional services. And so because that person came with that kind of a background in corrections and working in penitentiaries, that's exactly how he decided that Thomas Indian School would be operated. Children marched from here to there, just everything, you know, had its place. I talked to some of the men who went there. I would say majority of them went into the military. Military life was easy for them. They knew how to do all the marching, they knew how to line up, they knew how to dress with their uniforms, everything being exact, making the bed in a military style. They knew all that before they went into the military.
I was in A division, my sister was in B division. A whole lot of things that happened. Things that I can remember. When I was 6 years old, this man chased Rosemary and I from Mohawk Park because they took us all on an outing when it was time to come home. This man called us into the gazebo, told Rosemary and I that he had something for us, and that's where he tried to molest us. And we ran. And even now I have nightmares of running.
But my brother, he ran away after being here about 5 years. They never caught him. So
he said that we were really bad and we were born of the devil. And if we told anybody what he was doing, they wouldn't believe us anyway. And that's so true, because when he did, I think he had penetrated me that time, and I was bleeding and I was sore, and I went and I told the nurse, and she asked me what happened, so I told her, and she gave me a strapping, a real good strapping, and she told me, don't you ever speak about him like that again. She said, he would never do anything like that to you. So there I was again, getting another licking. And like now when I think about all the things that happened, I said, you're damned if you did and damned if you didn't, no matter which way you got a licking. And it just wasn't, just wasn't right.
And I remember this person telling me that any of the boys in his particular dormitory floor who were not circumcised yet at that point, without being told, were marched over to the infirmary, and if they weren't circumcised by then, they were circumcised, and if they didn't have their tonsils out by then, they had their tonsils removed. And I just couldn't imagine from his story how this could take place, number one. And number two, back in those times, in the late 40s and early 50s, they didn't have air conditioning like we had. And just the whole trauma of that personal invasion.
We were always having a physical. And then, like I said, if you had a hangnail, you had to go see the doctor. And if you got caught sitting on the ground or holding hands with the boy, you had to go see the doctor. They were all the time checking to make sure that everybody was a virgin. So in the summertime when we went out to work, he would give us a physical. And then when we came back, we'd get the physical. I said, and you better come back with everything that you left. You know, he wanted to know if you had intercourse or not, you know. And, but everything, little thing, sexual, they were always checking on us, you know. Yeah, they had you scared. But one girl thought that you got pregnant just holding hands.
They had shop on this floor here, then home economics on above.
Yeah, so I had my tonsils out, and I can remember trying to fool them. They used to put us to sleep with the ether. So they'd put a mask over us and we'd be tied down. And they'd pour that ether over our nose right like this and wait a while. And you'd have to inhale that, you know. And then they'd put some more on there again until you actually fell asleep from the ether. And then they'd take your tonsils out.
And there's the hospital over there. You want to get up closer. Yeah, I spent a year in that building, the hospital.
And then we always laughed about, there was a head in there he had in a bottle. We'd show everybody that got admitted to the hospital. You want to see the head? And it was in a jar that he'd saved. Appendix too were saved. He had them in a little bottle. So you want your appendix back? You know, they save those.
Just kept getting one thing right after the other. I had infection in my ear, then I had whooping cough, mumps, measles, you name it, I had it. And I had no help with my schoolwork. I ended up failing.
My brother was in sick there, and they said he just had a cough and a cold. And they would never let my father go up to see him. So one day my father came and he told the nurse he was going up to see his son and there was nothing she could do to stop him. And she said that she would call the principal, and he told her, call the principal. He pushed her out of the way and he went up. He says when he got up there, the stench was so bad he couldn't even hardly breathe. And he went in and there was my brother. The principal came running up after him, telling him to leave, and he told the principal, he said, if you don't want to go down those stairs, he said, you better leave. He says, and you better call the ambulance. So they called an ambulance, and the ambulance came. My brother was in Brantford General Hospital for 6 months. He had pleurisy, and he was there for 6 months. Then he was transferred to Lady Wellington Hospital in Oswego for 3 more months. When he came out of the hospital, he was so weak he couldn't even hold a pencil. And he just never ever really got better. He died an alcoholic.
What we see and the people we work with, there is multi-generational alcoholism in a lot of the families that we've worked with. And we do genealogy charts usually with the family to find out who their family is and what their resources they might have. And we do find that some of the parents or grandparents that they had were in boarding schools.
I would like to share with you part of my childhood and the effects boarding school has had on me. My father attended the Thomas Indian School. My grandfather went to Carlisle.
My mother and father were both in a boarding school, and my father was married before he married my mother, so he had 2 children, and they were sent away to boarding school. So I might say 2 generations there were in boarding school. My mother went to Thomas Indian School, and my father was at Carlisle, which was in Pennsylvania.
We all pound along the men soup together. I just want to grab a picture of my mom.
She had an Indian name, and the name that she had was to be a faith keeper's name. When she came out of that school, she couldn't speak a lick of Seneca.
You can see the difficulty in when the families try to parent their children, that the lack of bonding with their children, some anger, you know, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of anger and alcoholism. So those are some things that I see on a regular basis from families that had a relative or parent or grandparent who were in boarding schools.
I was ready for bed. Mom made Daddy get me up. I thought I was already ready for school. Okay? Got me up and cut all my hair off to above, right below my ear. She cut about that much. That was the last time I was allowed long hair. That's abuse.
And that was standard practice at the boarding school?
Yeah.
Everybody went through that one.
Everyone, you see? But that was another thing. We don't know if that was a carryover. We don't know.
She was trained to be a domestic. She learned the art of physical punishment.
So it's pretty heavy when you watch those videos. I mean, it's emotionally for me still. And even though I was not, I did not attend any boarding schools, my grandma did. And she shared similar stories of that happening right down the hill here in Stewart, in Carson City. These are the types of things that were happening. If you go online and look at some more videos, they're all similar. And one thing I do want to really stress and encourage in this field is self-care, because if you continue in this field, you're going to hear a lot of things that are unsettling. There's still some things that surprise me that I hear when I work with clients, but it's just really important to acknowledge that and take care of yourselves, because you'll hear a lot of stuff like this. So going on. So that's historical trauma. That's a main component besides the slaughtering of the people, the wars way back then. That is all part of it. But this kind of activity that happened to my great-grandparents and my grandparents is a huge component of what we see today. And I think Danny was mentioning earlier, he was getting on the track that it's important for you all and anybody that works in the field to know the history and to know why some of the cases that you're going to be working with, some of the clients that you're going to see, you're going to need to understand that history because it's complex. And I hear all the time, oh, that happened way back then, you know, they need to get over it. This is a new day. This is the new times. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. And even though, like I said, our family has experienced a lot of what they went through there, and we weren't even in attendance. It was my grandma that was. So my grandma and both my grandparents were fluent in Shoshone language, but they didn't teach the kids. Why do you think?
get a licking.
They would be discriminated against.
Yeah, my grandma said that she didn't want her kids experiencing what she went through, that fear in the back of her head, that's what was going to happen. And now today, what's happening with our language? We're striving to keep that language. We're striving to learn it and relearn it and to teach it. And, I want to share one story. Several years ago, we were in line at one of the functions that they were having in our community, and there was this Hispanic family that was in front of me and my grandma, and they started talking to us in Spanish. And I've never seen my grandma behave like this, but she said, "I don't speak Spanish. You need to speak English. You're here," and she's very angry. And she said, "You need to speak English. You need to learn English. You're here in this country. English, you need to learn it." And I was like, I think I was like 16 years old. And I was like, "Graham," like I was embarrassed. I'm like, "I'm so sorry. Like, Graham, like, you can't tell people that. That's not nice." Well, I had to learn it. I was forced to learn it. And this is what happened if I didn't learn it. And, that came out of her. And I understood. And that's her right. Those are her feelings. She experienced that. So I always try and tell people to keep those things in mind when you're working with clients. You're going to have some of those difficult clients where you have to nicely say, like, "Okay, that's not nice." And sometimes my grandma, she's still feisty. And we just kind of like, "Graham, okay," kindly and nicely, because in our culture, we don't talk back. You listen and you show your respect. And that's just the way that we are raised. But then on that side, I'm always the one that's speaking up and trying to teach her the right way. So, let's go. So, as a result from historical trauma, we face contemporary trauma. What does that look like? Oh,
one thing too is I think there's quite a bit of research that the reason why there's such a high alcoholism rate among Native Americans is because on a physiological level, they can almost be addicted from the first drink because they were never exposed to it.
Right.
So on a genetic level, their body is overly impacted. Well, their body, mind, emotions, everything.
Right.
So they're really operating at a huge deficit.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we can, there's so many different things that we can talk about in learning about the culture. Substance abuse is on its own course. It's another hour and a half, and we can talk about, all of that. And that's a really good point to bring up, is because our people suffer. Our number one drug is alcoholism. Our people die from alcoholism. My grandpa died cirrhosis of the liver. I was 11 years old, and I didn't understand what was happening to his body. Throwing up blood, rushing him to the hospital, slipped into a coma. I didn't understand that. And then my uncle, 40 years old, died, alcoholism. You know how they always say you marry who you're raised with, or you marry someone like your dad? My older daughter, her dad was an alcoholic, but he was a very social alcoholic, very fun, had a good time. He passed away in 2013, and same thing, alcoholism. But I think it's because, he was like my grandpa. They were fun, they were good time and people, but that happens. It's very true what they say. You learn what you see in your upbringing, and you learn those things and take them on yourself. So yes, thank you for sharing that. We are surrounded by alcoholism, and there's probably not one Native American person that does not have alcoholism in their family. So contemporary trauma includes child abuse. This is what we're seeing today as a result of historical trauma. Domestic violence, sexual assault, substance abuse, homicides, suicides. Those are all just the broad issues that there's so much more into that you guys will learn about. So, can I just find out where are you guys in your curriculum as far as what you know?
This is week 2.
We just went through crisis intervention and cycle of domestic violence the last couple of classes.
Okay. Okay, so very, very new.
Yes.
Yes, I can talk about some stuff.
Yeah.
Let's go back then. Let's see. So I'm going to talk a little bit about working with Native Americans and these kinds of issues. Now, not sure how many of you guys know, but we do work on the reservations. They're very isolated, very rural communities, small communities. Usually your family has certain plots, like here's a house here, grandma lives here, uncle lives here, cousins live here. You're all surrounded by family members. It's very high in poverty, a lot of alcoholism, and there's not much growth as far as economic growth. A lot of people don't work. They have tribal houses, and sometimes they're not owned by the individuals, they're owned by the tribe, but you can live there for free. So there's a lot of different areas that the reservations do benefit the people there. However, along with that, not working, being unemployed, poverty, substance abuse, there's a lot of these kinds of crimes that occur. The child abuse. When child abuse occurs, and again, tribal communities in discussing these topics are so complex, so I'm going to try to explain it in an easy way. When you have child abuse going on, usually the child, the victim, they won't report it. Why don't you think they'll report it?
They're scared.
They're afraid. They're scared. They're scared of the outcome. Maybe they're protecting brother or sister. There's so many different reasons why they don't report it. A lot of times they want to protect the perpetrator. You don't know what is going on. Same with domestic violence. We get people that leave their abatters, their situations, and they go back many times. And, we don't understand it, but there's always a reason. There's so many reasons. So what I like to point on in all of my presentations is it's important to understand that there's always a reason of why they stay. There's always a reason of why they return, and it's important not to be judgmental or get frustrated. Because as advocates, we're doing our jobs to make sure to help them, to provide the resources, to make sure and create that safety plan and that pathway that we hope that they take to get out of their relationship. However, if you have, say she married into the tribe, say she's Washoe and she lives on the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, and with her husband. Well, husband lives here and his mom lives here, and they have kids and they're all enrolled and they all go to school, but she's not from there. Everything is established there, so she may not want to leave. They go back all the time. So there's always a reason. So it's just really important to remain in your advocate role, do your best self-care, and just really understand that there's always a reason. The law enforcement and judicial system is different. They are sovereign nations. Most of the reservations operate with tribal police, their own tribal police, and their own tribal court. That's a whole nother session in itself to go into that. But just know that if a crime is committed on the reservation, if it's in their law and order codes, who knows if it's going to get prosecuted. So there's a lot of crime on the reservations that happen that aren't reported because nothing is going to happen. The crime is going to be ignored. Perpetrator is going to go free, and they're going to see him down the road. They're going to see him at their neighbor's house, at their cousin's house, at the market down the road. They're going to see him at our cultural events. So that's important to keep in mind when it comes to situations like that. Again, substance abuse and homicide. How many of you guys heard about the recent homicides on the McDermott Indian Reservation? No? No? Okay, so there were two women recently murdered, I want to say 3 weeks ago, on the McDermott Indian Reservation. If you look at your map, you're going to see where that is. It's right on your Oregon border. Right up here. Or, let's see, where are we? Oh, shoot. Fort McDermott, right up on top. So the closest town to them is in Winnemucca, which is about an hour and a half away. They are overseen by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, law enforcement. So they don't always have law enforcement on their reservation or colony. So when something happens like this, it takes a while for first responders to come and rescue and help the community. And a lot of our tribal communities work like that. So imagine when there is somebody in crisis, when you are trying to assist somebody, it's important to remember that first responders aren't always available. Usually it's your neighbor, your other community member who are the first responders. So that's an important thing to remember. There's a lot of jurisdictional issues. That's a whole nother session in itself because of the complexity of how crimes are handled and situated. So it's really a unique community. These communities are very unique in what they can and cannot do. You have the Washoe tribal community, who is based on California and in Nevada, and they have a small Woodfords community that's, both. I think it's Alpine County. So, I mean, things get really messy and complex when it comes to working among Native American communities.
Excuse me. Does the Indian reservations, do they have their own penal system, or do they have to go off reservation to prisons?
It depends. So, for example, the Reno Sparks Indian Colony has a contract with the Washoe County Jail, so they have some sort of system worked out with that jail. So it depends kind of on which one, where it's located. Yeah, Bowen too, I believe. So that's a good question. Any other questions?
Can you tell us what happened? So the two women were...
Oh yes, I'm sorry. So these two community women were murdered, and when I got the word, because everybody talks, it's a small community, everybody knew about it. There was all sorts of different stories, and it was another community member who had brutally murdered them, and he is now arrested and in custody. As far as I know, from what I understand, they're looking for somebody else. I don't know how accurate that is. Again, the justice system is complex, but the district attorney, not a district attorney, Shannon Bryant, he is our U.S. attorney. He will be prosecuting the case. However, he doesn't always take cases in the Native American communities because it's based upon the investigation. So if there's a crime committed on the Indian reservation, he wants evidence. He wants to be able to know that for sure he's going to be able to prosecute. And from what I've experienced personally and professionally, the time isn't that great. Justice is rarely served, and those are just some of the unfortunate outcomes that we are hoping to improve for our tribal communities someday, and that we're all working towards.
So are there like Indian attorneys then, that are people that go to law school, that are Indians that then can either defend or prosecute on the reservations, or is this almost always contracted outside the reservation to U.S. federal attorney or district attorney?
Right, yes. It depends on what the crime is. So we have what is called legal advocates who went through training and who can apply to be a legal advocate in that tribal court. And they also can come and hire a regular lawyer or attorney, but they have to be able to have that certificate that they practice Indian law. So it just depends tribe by tribe, the nature of the crime, and how that's going to play out. But it's, like I said, it's very complex, and we can get into that whole thing on another session. So, but that's just some updates on that, and just something to think about when you're working in tribal communities and working with victims. Let's see. So, this is a video, maybe we'll come back. Yeah, it's important. I need you guys to see it. Because we're going to get through the other. No. Do you know how to do that? I think I have to push E6. Yeah. Let's see.
This is on approaching Native women. Is that what it said?
It's on an approach to working with Native women. And do I just go here for the internet? Okay.
Do they have like phones and cell phones and stuff, or is it
Land?
not like Amish
It depends.
culture?
Yeah. No. Cell phones are if they're in a good area,
Right.
they'll get them.
Really
Yeah.
rural, it's harder.
Mainly landlines. Internet is sketchy. We'll talk a little bit about that too. But this video, I think it's important to share because it's kind of a perspective that outsiders are learning.
You, among other things, were reporting on a woman who had died and whose case was surrounded by secrecy and buried under layers of bureaucracy and paper. How did you get started on this, and how did you move it forward?
Our story came from a report from the Justice Department that said that it was in the middle of this 200-page report that was breaking down violence statistics in the United States, and it was talking about rape in the United States, and it said on like page 263 that 1 in 3 Native American women will be sexually assaulted in her lifetime. And I thought that just can't possibly be true, and it turns out that it is. So that's where the story started, but we knew that we were going to have to go to Native American reservations to do this story. And I think that in the beginning, we thought we were just going to show up and interview some people and have them tell us their stories, and then we would like pack up and go home and write a story about that. And it was, I think, the day that we arrived at Standing Rock Sioux Reservation in South Dakota, that we were there all of like maybe 12 minutes before we realized that was not going to happen. And we started off just, I think we had an idea that Amy Walters, my producer, and I had an idea that we were going to just make appointments and that we were just going to show up at the tribal council office and that the chief would be there and that we would interview them, and that's just not the way things work at Standing Rock Sioux. And I remember waiting outside of his office and talking to his administrators who were there working, and they were like, well, he's not even here today. And we said, but we had an appointment. And they said, but he's not here. He's like out on the ranch. And so we ended up realizing that you have to go from one person to the next person to the next person. And only then do people start letting you into their lives and introducing you to other people and trusting you and making the story come to life. But it was very challenging because you're an outsider and you're more of an outsider than you would be even trying to do this story in the middle of a city. And there's not a lot of trust, and there's not, people don't know you, and you don't know them, and you don't know where they're coming from, and they know that. And it just took a really long time to get people to open up to us. In the case of Leslie Ironroad, that story came up because everybody knew somebody who had been sexually assaulted, and everybody knew the story of this dead girl. And we couldn't find any record of her death with the police officers in Standing Rock. And that's because they never investigated the crime. they sent an officer to her hospital room who took notes about her death, and they went nowhere. This woman lived and died, and nobody ever took notice. So it seemed unbelievable to me that in this year in our country that a woman can die of sexual assault, and there is no case. It's not even that the case wasn't prosecuted or that the case, it had some twists and turns. There was no case. The woman simply died, and that was the end of it. So we took that charge to the chief of police in Standing Rock and presented him with that. And I think that's actually my favorite moment of the story is the 3 seconds of silence where he said, we said to him, he said, we investigate every sexual assault on Standing Rock. And he said, but, he said, I'm sure this woman lived here, and I'm sure she probably died, but we have no record of that. And what can we do if people don't report their assault? And I said, she reported it to a Standing Rock police officer, and 3 seconds of silence, which doesn't sound like a lot, but on the radio, it's an eternity. And it was after that he said, like I said, we simply have no record of that case. So then we went and we tracked down the police officer. And he was very forthcoming. He had just resigned from the police department because he said that there were so many instances of sexual assault and abuse on the reservation that he simply couldn't take it anymore and that he had to resign. And he said it was like standing in the middle of the river trying to hold back the flood. And I thought that spoke volumes of what was happening on these reservations. And so it was with that, there is one person that can investigate these crimes, and that's the federal government. And what we found is that they're not doing that at all. So that was the impetus of our story. But at the end of it, after we spent a lot of time in North and South Dakota and a lot of time in Oklahoma, we were able to go to, after getting to know people, we finally got invited to things, and we were invited to a sweat lodge in Oklahoma, and that is it's like a dome where they put a fire in the middle, and it's really, really hot, and you go in there, and in this particular sweat lodge, it's for women to come and tell about their stories, and it's very spiritual, and it's incredibly private, and there's definitely no microphones in the sweat lodge, but because we had gotten to know some of these women and some of these people, they allowed us to tape record some of what was going on and to talk about it a little bit. And I think we actually have the clip. That'd be great if we could play it. But I just want to say one thing about the sweat lodge first is that I was 7 months pregnant at the time, and it is really, when I say it's hot, it is really hot in these sweat lodges, and we were in this thing, and I'm thinking, you're not supposed to be in saunas. I don't think this is just like a sauna. I don't know. I'm not sure, but this really feels like a sauna. And Amy Walters, God bless you, stuck it out for 4 hours in this sweat lodge. And if it were not for that, we would not have gotten the tape that we did coming out of that, because you are all sharing your stories and you're all talking to the ancestors. And I had to leave and step outside, and Amy stuck it out through the whole thing. And there's nothing like at 1 o'clock in the morning seeing your half undressed producer on somebody's lawn with a hose, cooling herself down afterwards. But truly dedication. It was truly dedication as far as a producer goes. So anyway.
It talks a little bit about their perspective and working and thinking that they can just go into the reservation or Indian communities and they have an idea of what it's like on the outside world, but not an idea of what it's like on the inside. And she talked about, that. So some key issues. They were outsiders. They had their own plan, their own idea how to get the story. They had their own perspectives of how their target population works. And you just can't, because every population, every culture you're going to encounter is different. Filipino, the Hispanic culture. Let's see. They had their own idea of how they were going to get their report. So they were good troopers, though. They participated, they built trust in the community, and we have a pretty good idea of why there's such trust issues in the Native communities is because of what they went through from the federal government. What they learned is that the challenges of being an outsider, and they gained the trust of the people. And they were invited. They were invited to participate in this ceremony practice, so that was really huge. And they learned about the process of what happens to a crime in their community. Any additional observations or comments?
I got a question.
Yeah.
How long did they say they were there for?
In the Sweat Lodge?
No, in the
I don't know. I want
the
to
whole
say it was.
reservation.
I want to say it was days. I can't remember.
Oh, okay. It wasn't weeks or months. It was relatively short.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
I have to go back. Did it say in the video?
I don't know if
Anybody
it
else
says
catch
or not.
that? Yeah.
It didn't say
That's
whether
a
they had a
good-
press conference. It looked like they probably investigated that crime and
Yeah,
probably led
they
to,
had
you know what I
to
mean? It
talk
probably led
to
to setting
different
stuff
people.
up with the community. I'm sure they got involved.
Yeah. Right.
For a long term, you know.
That's what I was just thinking, like I wonder how long it took them to build that trust.
Yeah, she was at a
Have
press
the
conference for
community.
sure. For
Right.
How?
Yeah. It could have been over several weeks.
Okay.
It could have been just because of she said she had to talk to this person and this person and yeah.
It seems like it's maybe a little more obvious form of the overall denial that we currently have in this culture.
Yeah. Or just
it's really
not
same
being,
stuff, only just more extreme.
yeah, and just not being educated, you know, not being aware. And that's, you know, it's reason why, you know, I was brought here is to help you guys. And I think Paul is amazing. He's the executive director, I believe, of Safe Nest Tahoe Safe Alliance. And he, you know, he was like, hey, can you come up here? So I think this is my third or fourth time up here. So local agencies experiencing working with Native American victims. So I had reached out to one of our domestic violence programs in Reno, and I had asked the advocates, and you know, give me your experience, give me your feedback of what, you know, some of the questions that you have in working with Native Americans when they come through your office. And they said that they felt like that they had to pry for information. That was one of the main things. They also recognized that almost all of the women had history of alcoholism. And we talked a little bit about that. They all had somebody and they all had family that knew someone. So there was trust issues because in Reno there's, you know, all the reservations and colonies are connected by community. You have so many different people that know each other and from all over. So there's trust issues. So, for example, they may not want to come to my program because their aunt works down the hall, or they know somebody there, or they know me, and that's perfectly okay. But we try to work with the organizations, and I think in the past 10 years we built this program, and surrounded that trust because they still sometimes don't trust us. They're often very quiet. Again, in our culture, we're raised to listen and speak when you're spoken to. The kids are also very quiet because we also teach them, you know, you heard in the video, you're not to trust anybody. You know, you listen, and that's usually how the kids are being raised. They didn't want to utilize the Native American programs. They didn't like the program. They said it was too structured. They didn't want to involve law enforcement. A lot of times, as you guys will learn and as you guys will know, sometimes, you know, if you ask for a police report or a protection order or a restraining order, it may do the client more harm than good. And you let the client will tell you, is this safe? Is it safe to get a protection order? Is it safe to get a restraining order? If she says no, that he'll walk right through that, then it's in the best practice to listen to them. So a lot of times they don't want to involve law enforcement, and they actually opened up a lot more if they were a repeat client. So if they've been there a couple times and they start learning and building trust, they opened up more. And the women seemed like very hard and very tough. So that was the feedback from that particular domestic violence program. So this one is on local victims' experience with her own tribe. So I had interviewed a couple of the Native American women that within her own tribe that had a domestic violence program there. What was your experience, or what happened? And they had said that the social services took their kids but still allowed them to be in the home. And social services is another complex issue when it comes to the Native American tribal communities. So their systems are different. They actually don't require licensed social workers to work there. They are people that they just hire, and they're called social workers. So the laws are different, and so a lot of times when the children get pulled from mom or dad, they go to grandma, grandpa. Well, what's happening, grandma, grandpa? Uncles may be in the house, aunties may be in the house, alcoholism, substance abuse. So a lot of times they're placed in unhealthy environments because of this generational trauma. So social services took their kids but still allowed them to remain in the home. So they had custody, but because they didn't have anywhere to place them, they were in the home. They are threatened by the systems because of previous experience, which they won't report. They felt like they were being punished, and they felt like the worker had something against her and her family, and that's very common. In these small communities, a lot of times tribal leaders are related to people, so they have to be very careful. Some of those decisions are based upon who they know and who their family is. So that's something that happens a lot. Tribal politics, that's huge right now. Feels like the community, let's see, I can't really read that. Oh, the children that have behavioral problems, but they won't go through their own services. So if there's mental health issues or any kind of behavioral issues, they have a clinic there, but they won't take their child to that facility because of confidentiality issues or whatever kind of services they may or may not get. They actually, let's see, she felt like the community members, they're not heard, and that the officers respond from wherever they are. Because if you look at your map, let's just say the Pyramid Lake Reservation, for example. The Pyramid Lake Reservation is, I think, our largest reservation in Nevada besides the Walker River Indian Reservation. It's right here, number 14. So they have 3 communities that are all about 15 minutes apart, and they go everywhere on that Pyramid Lake Reservation. So you never know where your first responders are going to be. People show up before the police. We talked about that, and she said that she will never seek help again through her own tribe. Let's see. So additional beliefs of Native American victims, that they will be blamed. They got what they deserved, because that's often said. They're humiliated. So if there is a sexual assault, well, you shouldn't have been drinking. Again, blame, guilt, the retaliation of families because you have a cousin that lives right down the road. A lot of times, do we know anything about sexual assault crimes yet? And the statistics on sexual assault? 80% of sexual assault crimes is usually committed by somebody that we know. So I'm pretty sure you guys will learn about that. And 20% is unknown. And that could be acquaintances, family members, and, all of that. So retaliation of families, there's no help available, fear, confidentiality, no justice for the crime. So if they report that and cause all this ruckus, there's still not going to be any justice. Protecting the perpetrator, humiliation to the family, especially if the tribal leaders are involved. A lot of the times they're unaware that rape is a crime. There's trust issues, shame, fear for their children, fear for their family members. Can you think of anything else? Non-tribal organizations that are recognized. So this particular interview was done with one of the sheriff's officers in our state, in one of our smaller communities. And he had shared that some of the issues that they have with the tribal communities are territorial and jurisdiction issues. So they feel like their officers are very territorial. if they have somebody that steps foot, commits a crime in the city and then goes back to the reservation, they need to work together in that, and they were feeling like that's not happening. Communication issues, they're not truly understanding the culture, so he did share that he had officers working that were brand new and they didn't know anything about working in Native American communities, and you're surrounded by all the reservations. You need to learn about that. So he acknowledged that, and he acknowledged that his officers need to change their perspective and their behaviors when it comes to working with different cultures. And again, at that time, they didn't understand what it meant to be a victim, or how to, they were doing a lot of re-victimizing. So how to work effectively with Native American victims, it's important to find a way to earn trust. So that's probably the most important thing. Let the victim know that you're on their side. Don't blame or re-victimize. Be empathetic. Be at their level. When we go and do presentations in the tribal community, I usually wear boots and some jeans. It's intimidating if I'm dressed up in a suit or a dress and I'm talking about certain things, and people may not want to open up or ask me questions. So be at their level. Realize that not all victims have the same reaction, and you guys are going to learn a little bit more about that as you go along. So you may have a victim who's very tearful, who's very depressed, and you may have a victim that's just not. They show no signs. So not all victims have the same reaction. Ask permission to ask questions. And that may sound funny, but if you want more information on their family, can I ask, where do you come from? Where's your family from? That's one of the things that we as Native Americans, when I see another Native, I'll be like, oh, hey, are you Native? Yeah, where were you from? That's like the way we introduce each other, and so we introduce where we're from. Inform them of the process. I think that's probably the most important thing that I'd like to share is nobody likes to be blindsided. Nobody likes to not know where their path is going to go, what's going to happen. So if you can inform them of the process and be honest, I don't know what's going to happen, but this is what we're going to do today, etc. Be patient. Ask if they would feel more comfortable with Native American advocate. And it's okay. Don't take it personal. You can't take it personal. It's their stuff, whatever they're dealing with. Let's see. Don't be offended if they don't want to work with you. Learn about her family if they allow. Help them find resources. So you guys are, I'm a resource. Cultural healing. Ask them if they participate in any of that. Assure confidentiality. Let the victims teach you. That's probably another important thing that when you come out as advocates, even though we may think we know what's best for our victim or for our client that we're working with, we want their perpetrator to be punished and go through the justice system, and we want them to go to jail and do time. They may not want that. They may not want that at all. We don't know. So let them teach you on how they want to handle their situation. Help find their strengths. That's really important, because when we do this work and we work with clients, a lot of people will come in just at their lowest point. They're in crisis, and you want to do whatever you can to make them feel comfortable. That's a great jacket. At least you have a jacket. It's freezing outside. That's a strength. I mean, find anything that you can, because we all should be able to find strengths in our clients. Ask her how they feel. Open-ended questions, because a lot of times when I'm working with clients, I get yes, no, depending on if they know me or not. So if you want more information, you gotta ask those open-ended questions, because they're not gonna open up right away. And ask if there's anyone they can trust. We're almost done here. So when you're working in a non-Native organization, it's very important to learn about the history of the Native American culture that surrounds you. Again, we have tribal many tribal communities that you guys are surrounded by. And I really highly recommend and encourage you guys take a visit to the Stewart Indian Museum, the school down here. And it's in Carson. It's the Stewart Indian School, and it's actually listed on your map right there. Go online, look into it, do some, play around with it. Let's see, learn about the population that you serve. So primarily we have California tribes and we have Nevada tribes. Learn about the process of tribal dynamics. Learn about extended families, because our extended families are important to us. If something happens to my brother or my sister, it affects our family as a whole. Even though we're adults, it's gonna affect my mom, it's gonna affect my grandma. Our extended families are just like our whole family unit. Attend cultural events. So I'm gonna send Paul the flyer so you guys can have, but in Carson, Father's Day weekend, they have an annual powwow, and it's a beautiful powwow. They have it every year and it keeps growing, and I highly recommend and encourage you guys go and see what a powwow is like. It's very spiritual. It's very, like, you just feel the energy when you're there. And I will get you that flyer. What was that?
They don't mind visitors?
Oh no, it's open to everybody. They welcome everybody. So I think it'd be really neat if you guys can go, and I'm gonna I'll send Andrea the flyer so she can get it to you guys next week.
Can you send her the PowerPoint too?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
yep, you guys will have that. Attend trainings. So if you see any trainings, upcoming trainings in the communities, I will also send those to her. Reach out to the tribal communities. If you have difficulties reaching out, you can utilize me. I have my business cards here if you want more information, and if I don't have the answers, I can help get them for you. Make your face known in tribal communities. It's the trust thing again. We have a lot of non-natives that work in our communities, and they, as long as you do your job and you get to know people, and it works out great. Don't give up. Be committed to your work. Be consistent. That's probably another important thing. Be open-minded and respectful. Again, we have had people that maybe get offended over certain things, but it's just important to try really hard not to be. Just be open-minded. And this is kind of what I talked when I was putting this together. I talked to another Native organization, and we talked about some of the issues that we have in inviting outsiders in. And it's important that everybody brings down their walls, not be territorial, ask questions, not assume, and learn about the different programs, because we're all working together for the same goal in ending violence against families. Again, here's more. So don't assume that the culture ended, they don't teach them. Okay, so if we're working with non-Native communities, it's important that we know. That's why I always ask, like, how much do you know? That we don't assume that you guys understand the culture, and if not, teach them. We'll teach you. Conduct program and trainings, join community events, sending out invites, collaborate, be the connection. I'm your connection. Share our culture, teach them the history, bring down those walls, don't be territorial, network, ask questions, etc. Now, that was really kind of fast at the end. One of the things that I forgot to include in that was the stereotypes surrounding Native Americans. We don't live in teepees. A lot of our Nevada tribal communities were ranchers. We still have horses. We still have, land. They're very well into the rancher lifestyle still, but they have housing communities. Another common misconception or thought is that we all get gaming money. There's casinos, so we're all recipients of casino gaming money, and that's not true. So our Nevada tribes don't have that kind of revenue coming in. However, right over the hill here, you have a lot of prominent rancherias that are doing fairly well with their tribal casinos, and they're different. They're smaller groups over there. So it's important to realize that not everybody gets gaming monies. Know your tribal communities. We still have the same issues. They still have the same issues in their communities that the reservations and colonies don't hear, because of the poverty issues. There's still issues.
Who actually owns the casinos on Indian?
The tribes.
The tribe does.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not equally distributed.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever revenue that they bring in from their casinos, that all gets distributed amongst the enrolled tribal members. Yeah, and you have a lot of Southern
California.
Southern California rancherias and tribal communities that are very small, maybe 300 members, maybe 50, and they live off the royalties, and they're set up very, very nicely. And actually, that's a joke within the community. It's like, oh, I gotta go find me a casino husband. I gotta go find a California Indian. It's just a common joke, but yeah. And another thing is, some of the positive things. I like to share a video, but I can't find it. Some uplifting and inspiring things is, we're still here. And there's a lot of good things that our tribal communities are doing, and we're trying to bring back the language, we're trying to preserve our culture. There's still so much more to learn and to be taught. Has anybody had the opportunity to visit the Pyramid Lake Reservation or Pyramid Lake at all?
Yes.
Yes? Yeah? Good. In the summertime, it's beautiful. It's a very unique lake. Again, get online and read about it. It cleans itself, and so 2 times a year. So in the fall, like August, I think, the water starts turning. So basically, it's cleaning everything from the bottom, and it comes to the surface. And then in the summertime, it's like Caribbean color water, warm water. And what it is, it's the runoff from the snow from Tahoe, from the Truckee. But it's a beautiful lake. There is a fee that you could go and you pay, and you can camp. There's a very reasonable price. It's warmer than Tahoe. It's cheaper than Tahoe. It's more wide open. The beaches are nice.
It's like Mars.
Yeah, you can have fires on the beach. So, and they have a museum there that talks about the Paiute culture there, Pyramid Lake Reservation.
Is it really haunted?
I have never experienced anything out there.
Well, there's like Indian rock that's crazy out there. You can go crawl through the ground.
There's lots of different things. There's lots of different stories out there that people have experienced themselves. There's we hear a lot of stories from the elders, the community, and the way I look at it, and the way my husband and I believe, because he grew up out there, we believe that the issues and the people that do harm to the lake, that don't respect it, are the ones that probably receive the
negative spirits.
The negative spirits, the other issues, the bad juju.
Yeah, I've heard it's amazing there.
It's, if you guys can this summer, one day, go out there, take a swim. It's awesome. We spend a lot of our family time there. Yeah.
Do they have vocational training programs on the reservation? Like, obviously, I'm not sure the high schools probably help a lot of people matriculate to college. I don't know what the percentage of Native Indians actually able to go to higher academic levels, but I'm just wondering if there's active vocational training programs for them to learn other trades.
There is funding for that. So our Native Workforce Department, if they're an eligible member, they can come and inquire and say they want to go to truck driving school. They will pay for that and provide them, help them get their license and provide the clothing, things like that. So there are some resources for that. And there are tribal communities that do offer that. I know in Bishop, my sisters still live there, so I'm still heavily connected to that community. They do amazing things understand that. Of course, they have the casino. They have their casino going. It's not as big and prominent as the other California ones, but they do have those types of programs there for their tribal members. So it just depends on what tribal communities are doing.
The thing that I'm so interested in and impressed with is their spirituality. That over the millennia, they and living in nature and living organically and naturally, they have a very deep spiritual connection.
Right. You're absolutely right, and that still is happening on a lot of the reservations. They still live off the land. Like every fall, my husband, he goes hunting, and he's, if on a good season, we'll have our deer meat stocked up in the freezer. Or they fish. My brother's a fisher. We have tons of fish.
But they also have almost like ancient processes for and towards enlightenment.
Yeah.
I'm not American, so I don't know a lot of history. And it's very similar to Australian history with our Aboriginals. But learning about the schooling system and how the culture was made to speak English, and it ties in with what she was saying. Has your culture been made to become the religion of this land, and how does that fit in, or does it not, or do you keep your own?
It depends, and that's a really good question. So, for example, what sticks out to me, the tribal community that sticks out to me is in the Albuquerque, New Mexico area. You have Arizona, who is the Navajo people. They're from those lands. But in Albuquerque and the surrounding outside of New Mexico, you have what's called pueblos. And the history between the Spanish and their tribal communities, from what I understand in a really brief statement, is that they had to kind of combine cultures with the Spanish. And so they've adopted a lot of their cultures, religion, and practices, and they have adopted, I'm not religious at all. I was not raised with a religion, and so I'm not familiar with that, but they were raised kind of like a Catholic way. And they honor the saints. They have dances, traditional dances on special days of the saints. But yeah, that's...
Is that something like watching the videos and hearing the speakers saying, well, I had to speak English if I didn't.
I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Is this a sense of pain or hurt, or is it embraced with doing that?
I'm not native, but from what I've experienced and read is that even in native cultures, and this goes way back to when the white man first came over here, and it's still, I think, ingrained, is that some of the natives wanted to just not fight and kind of embrace the culture, and other natives were like, this goes totally against our way and our culture, and with pride we're like, fuck that, you guys are actually, they had names for the Indians that would take help from the white people and would go to the reservation instead of fight and try to keep their sovereignty. So it's probably the same way even to this day. There's a pride issue involved in being sovereign, keeping the culture, and then trying to accept the help at the same time. It's I think it's one of the hardest things or cultures to assimilate into.
English was not their first language. It was their native language, and they it's painful. Like my grandma, her first language was Spanish. Shoshone, and for her to have to learn English, I asked her, Graham, how do you say this? How do you say that? She's 83 years old. She just had a birthday, and she.
Something that's really cool.
Yeah.
When you hear about things like their rain dances that actually produce rain somehow,
Yeah. Yeah, they have dances, the pueblos, they have dances, I think, on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, on New Year's Day, but it's whatever the saints, like I said, I am not religious, I don't know, but they practice that. And when they talked about them in the boarding schools, they were converted. Almost all the children were converted and baptized into some religion.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of like the old stories of like the thunder horses and the white horse was to come converted into Christ. So like just like overlap the mythology with Christianity.
Because you heard them talk a little bit about the devil and God and, you know. Let's see, is this my ticket? Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Clarice.
Thank you. I'm sorry that we took up so much time.
They are with Tahoe Safe Alliance, our residential and transitional housing program, Coco Zarate and Imelda Valdez. All right.
Hello everybody, I am Coco Zarate. I'm a Truckee local. I work within the children's program, transitional housing, and in the shelter. So that's what my title is here at Tahoe Safe Alliance.
I'm Imelda Valdez, and I am a bilingual advocate, and I work directly with the residential and transitional housing program.
So when we came here, we're gonna tell you what we do in the shelter and transitional housing, and how we work that, and how we, as an agency, how we treat our clients, and how like pretty much an overview of what the shelter program is, okay? And the transitional housing program.
Okay. So Tahoe Safe Alliance is the only agency that owns and operates the safe house in the North Tahoe and Truckee communities. The other one that we have in the Tahoe area is over in South Shore, and the rest of them we connect with in the Reno area.
So some of those are live violence-free advocates to end domestic violence in Carson City. We have the Indian advocates over in Reno. So we work together with other shelters, not together, but we communicate with other shelters when there's requests for shelter and we don't have space. We connect them with other resources in the area, so that and they reach out to us if they don't have space, and if we do, we take them in. So we collaborate with other shelters in the area.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I meant to ask Clarice this, but do you get many First Nation women or families that come to the shelters, the Tahoe Safe Alliance? Do you have many of them as clients?
What do you mean First Nation?
What, the Indians?
Yeah, we have had
the Paiutes and the Washoe and.
I don't know what exactly tribe she was from, but we have had Native Americans come into our shelter.
I actually worked with a community member who was a Native American like a month ago, but she was seeking services specifically for an agency that focused in with Native Americans.
Yeah, I meant to ask her if they had any safe houses on the reservation. She's Shoshone, but I was just curious, since it looks like there's so many reservations in Nevada, I was wondering if they had some safe houses someplace, because one would think, given the whole list of challenges they have, that they probably have, you know, a lot of women and families that need services. You know.
What I've heard, and I know, it's the Urban Indians agency down in Reno. They do have some shelter. It's not like ours, but they do provide some weeks in a hotel and have their process of shelter. So they, that's the only one that I know of. So it's in Reno, so yeah.
And actually their contracts with the hotels are for like long periods of times, like for up to a week or 2 weeks or even a month.
Right.
Yeah, for ours it's just 1 or 2 nights.
Right. Thanks.
So the Mountain State House, all our services are voluntary. We do not discriminate against anyone, and actual or perceived race, color, religion, national origin, age, sexual orientation, any gender or disability or immigration status or anything. We don't discriminate against them. That's nothing. That doesn't even come to the question of if you're allowed to come into our shelter or not. There might be some questions about, there's been about men coming into a shelter, but we do accept anybody. Anybody who's a victim or who's fleeing a domestic relation is susceptible to a program.
And Gogo has been the first advocate who has worked with a transgender individual with a male or first male. And just something to keep in mind is that not all of the shelters accept males in their shelters or even programs. Sapat the Safe House is just a local location in the North Tahoe, Truckee area, and the address is confidential. If you're a volunteer, you will have to sign a form saying that you will not disclose the location of the shelter. It's just a small cabin for 3 families. They don't share a room, so if it's just one person and there's 3 beds in the same room, you know, they don't get to share a room. Only if it's a sister and they want her to come in with them as well. So just the basic areas, you know, we have an office area with a computer, with internet. That way they can have access to resources and, you know, other stuff that they need. We have a backyard with a playground, which we actually had 2 volunteers help us set up the playground last summer.
And also, one of the important things is that the shelter is very confidential because, like you guys know, and it's also against the law. It's a California law to disclose the location of the shelter. I'm guessing it's a misdemeanor. The reason is that, like I said, being in a small community, if someone is looking for their partner, we know each other and we know a lot of people. And so word goes along and they can find that person. And not only are we putting that person is in danger, as also the people that are in the shelter are in danger. So we highly, that's one of the number one, strictly, not enforced, but really say, do not disclose the location of the shelter or else you will be asked to leave.
And another thing is that we have cameras around the shelter and we connect with the highway patrol, so they're just right in town, which is really good. And then we have a really close connection with the Truckee Police Department, which, if anything goes wrong, as soon as we get a release, they have access to that information of who to, if they see him or her in the area.
And the cameras are facing in different directions than the shelter, so if someone knocks the door, they know who's coming, and they know who's knocking the door, who's coming from the side door, so it's kind of keeping them safe and feel a little safer when they're in there. Yes?
In instances where you guys have an issue with someone giving out the location, do you guys then move the home, or what actions do you guys take at that point?
I had an incident when someone disclosed the location, so we asked them to leave. We gave them at least an hour because we don't want the things to escalate. We usually have 2 advocates with us there to escort them out. The reason why we do that is because, like I said, that puts other people in danger because we don't know the perpetrator and we don't know who comes in. And so we do, it's not like we don't tell them in the beginning of the intake that we're going to talk about, but we specifically tell them to not share the location and you're going to be asked to leave the shelter. And unfortunately, we ask them to leave. We do put them in a hotel for 1 night or 2 nights so they can figure it out. But that doesn't mean that they stop receiving our services, but that just means that they are not more eligible to receive that service.
Okay. But we can't move our shelter.
Right, yeah.
Unfortunately, it is a small town and word's going to get around. And so we highly encourage our community members to keep that confidential for safety of the participants in the safe house.
Right, okay.
And then we changed the code and everything, so the lock and everything's changed, so they're no longer allowed to be in there.
Okay, so some of the things that we provide as advocates is every family or every individual is assigned an advocate to do case management with them. But sometimes they just don't want to, they just don't want to deal with us. So they only want a room to stay and just move to the next step. And we respect that. As we said, all of our services are voluntary.
And like the Native American advocate was talking, we don't force them to do anything. We give them options and they decide whether they want to take them or not. We explain to them, we said, if they just need a safety room over their head, we provide that for them because they, like she said, they know better about their situation. And we just let them decide whether they want to continue in our program or they just want to stay in the house in a safe place. We brought peer counseling, licensed therapy, in medium partner violence, sexual assault education, pattern changing techniques, therapy art project, financial literacy. I am the only one that does financial literacy with another advocate that does direct services. So I teach them about credit cards. We go about, and not all of our victims, but some of our victims don't know how to manage finances. So I help them through that, open up a bank account, you name it when it comes to financial literacy. Like I said, we have advocacy and accompaniment to different appointments. That means medicals. If they have an appointment at the courts, we go with them as a support system. We help them fill any paperwork that they have. So of that, translation. We have worked with the Latino community as well. So our job title is bilingual advocate, and that's for a reason because we want to provide. It's not like we're excluding the ones that are not bilingual, but we encourage that so that we provide all those non-English speakers as well. Translation, children's program services and legal assistance. Our legal advocate is Brenda, so she usually takes more of custody and more complex advocacy. What I do is just restraining orders and court accompaniment and court prep and things like that. The children's program, I also work within the children's program, so I'm half residential and half children's program. And what we do in the children's program, if there's a group of children in a shelter, we usually go out and go skiing, and they do kayaking in the summer, so healthy activities that promote healthy coping skills for our children. We do support groups and other special activities. That's a monthly basis. Each advocate is assigned to a month, and he comes up with an activity or something productive to offer the community members. And we provide the essentials, food, which means no fancy stuff, but we just provide milk, eggs, food, toiletries, so that they are being fed and they're being taken care of. Shampoo, washer detergent, all of that. Toiletries and other daily essentials.
And if you guys take a look at this sheet, is actually the form that we use for everyone just to do case management. And as we know, every case is different. So, we just remove some stuff that they don't need and we just add the additional stuff that they need as well. And then we, like Coco said, we do referrals to local therapists that we contract with, to the legal advocate, with to our immigration program, to the children's program, and we usually focus with the restraining orders only.
And this is just an outline, kind of just give them an idea of can you look at this and see if something like this interests you. I know the first week is they're trying to adjust to the program. We usually give them their space, and then we slowly try to make appointments to see what they want to work on or what they don't want to work on, and then we focus on what they really want to do, not what we think that they want to do. So like I said, this is just an outline, and we go week 1, the TRO, which is temporary restraining order. For example, if they're fleeing an abusive relationship, if they are afraid of the perpetrators, we help them through filing that. If they want to, medical appointments, and if you see here step by step and read, it's pretty much whatever they want to focus on.
So now, if you guys work if you are volunteers with the crisis line, there's a pre-screening process that we require, and then we will take care of who answers our calls and who's eligible for the program.
Okay. So to be eligible to enter our safe house, you have to be actively fleeing a domestic relationship or have to be homeless due to a domestic situation. So domestic violence, sexual assault, or child abuse to be able to enter into our shelter. We have received homeless requests because when you look online and you type in Google shelter, our name comes up. So we say, I'm sorry, that's not the services that we provide, but we do try to connect them with the homeless shelters in Reno. So we just want to focus on those, we focus on that population.
And then we also consider how long have they been homeless. So sometimes they have been homeless for a year due to domestic violence. So what we tend to ask them if it happened within the 6 months and if they haven't been in a shelter before. That's something what we consider, because what they tend to do is because their time is over at the other shelter, they want to go to the other one. So we just try to leave it for people who are currently fleeing a domestic violence, sexual abuse relationship. And all of the requirements are on the other sheet that we provided, okay?
The other sheet that says residential program referral process. This is the step 1, 2, and 3, and 4 on how our process works. For example, on the step 1, we do, like I said, must actively fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. Must be 18 years or older or legally emancipated. Children's pets are allowed in the safe house, but only 1 pet at a time. So we do have, I believe we do have a relationship with the Humane Society that can host their pet if there's already a pet in the shelter, and they can visit every day and they can have their pet host there. You must discuss the following with the participant. So when someone calls in on a crisis and they need shelter and our shelter is full, we don't guarantee that we have shelter. Not because we don't want to offer the shelter, or it's because we don't know if the shelter is full or someone's going to leave, or we never guarantee that they're going to have shelter. So I know some people think like if I'm going to move there, I want to guarantee that I'm going to get a room, but in this case, just to avoid conflict of, you told me that I had a room available, and let's say that's not the case, and it could create a little bit of conflict. So, so we discuss there's shelter options in the area. We also talk about how difficult the housing crisis is up here in the North Lake Tahoe. Before, let's say, we do have a room available. Our program, I forgot to say, is a 90-day program, and we do have a room available, and there's a person fleeing from out of the area. We offer their room because they qualify for our services, but we do let them know that our houses up here, the houses crisis up here is, and the transportation and everything we explain how it is, and we tell them like up front, and we said, this is what you're coming to, so that we're not setting them for failure. So when there's 90 days past, they go back really quick and not they're homeless. So we try to inform them of what's going on in the area.
Yeah, and another thing to consider is that childcare is really expensive and limited up here.
So most of the time they have a job and they have a place to stay, but they're struggling finding childcare. So this is the form that you guys fill out, and all of our advocates at Tahoe Safe Alliance complete. Some of the things that we require is write about their current situation as detailed as you guys can. What are their needs at the moment? If they have any kids, if they have pets, if they want a restraining order, if they have a job, and if they're from out of the area, if they have been in another shelter before, when did that happen, and how long have they been homeless for. And then we tend to ask them for future goals within 3 months, a year, and 3 years, just to see where, if we're going to be able to help them, or if it's best just to refer them to other agencies, like I said, in the Nevada area or down the hill. And one thing to keep in mind is that we are pet friendly, as Coco said. We are only one of a few in the nation. Most of the shelters don't accept pets, and it's really difficult to choose between your safety and your pet's safety. So that makes it that forces victims to stay with their abuser. And and then and the other thing is that we have a really, like Coco said, we have a really close relationship with the Humane Society. So they allow us to leave their pet, if there's space, leave their pet in the shelter for the 90 days. And like I said, many shelters in the nation don't accept pets. And let's move on. And one thing that I'm actually starting next month is provide pet therapy for the residents at the Safe House. So I'll be taking the residents just to do pet therapy.
To hang out with animals or what?
Yeah, the Humane Society has a specific trained, certified dogs and a cat as pet therapy, pet animals.
I want to meet them.
Therapy animals. So, and then, sorry, what?
Do you guys have, if say you have volunteers with the kids or with whatever, do the volunteers sometimes bring their pets if a child needs to go for a hike, or like if you're taking someone hiking, or would you?
Well, what we ask is, if your dog, for example, is friendly with kids, and if they're,
of course, yeah.
So that's some of the things that we consider. And then the kids program actually has an advocate. What's Suledma's title?
She's just the office support in crisis intervention support. But Jocelyn is our children's advocate.
Well, Sulema, who's not an advocate, will be handling the pet therapy for the children's, for the kids. So maybe you can volunteer and help her out with, taking the kids to.
Oh, I don't have a dog. I was just curious. I did have a dog back home. Who was
yeah, so if you're interested in working with animals and kids. So I'm just focusing with the residential, and she's focusing with the kids. And transitional housing?
Transitional housing, this is something that we do offer, but it's based on our budget. If money is available, and if we have the finances, we do offer it. So there's a requirement to go into the transitional housing. You have to be actively participating in the program, and it had to be. You have to graduate from the program and meet qualifications. That means that you're actively doing, you are seeking work, you have a job, you're ready to move into to your own place. You have a secure place that you have worked on. And what transitional housing is, we provide rental assistance, and we provide food. We help them with bills. So we're not just throwing them out 90 days later, we just be, oh, I'm sorry, you're out of the shelter. We help them transition into, that's why it's called transition housing, into, so that's gradually we cover up to like $950 the first month, first 3 months, and then it gradually decreases till like 70% and then 50%, and then we let them eat. But then they're always welcome to receive our services, therapy and other things that we do offer. Yes.
I know a lot of the affordable housing is really hard to get into in this area. So do you guys have any like leeway with that? Because the wait list is like years.
Yeah, it's up to 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what they tend to do is just move out of the area.
Yeah.
That's what usually happens. We allowed them to find a roommate, but both of them have to be in the lease, because they have to be able to get a lease under their name. That way and if that's the case, we will only pay for half of it. Yeah.
2 questions. Is St. Francis Church in Incline part of your other resources? You said I refer them to other agencies. I'm curious if you have support from other community-minded people in Incline, I guess. St. Francis is one that I'm familiar with, but
I'm not familiar with St. Francis. I've never referred them to there, but I know that the church is there. But we have Tao Family Solutions. Also, it's like a family resource center in Incline, and they have relationships with other organizations in Incline. So our go-to is them, and we do have a good relationship with Tao Family Solutions.
And Tao Family Solutions does connect with St. Francis of Assisi. They actually provide funding to Tall Family Solutions to provide to community members that are in need of rental assistance.
Okay.
So yes, there's a resource.
And then the other question was, do you find the majority of the people you work with are there and then they're like, okay, I know what I'm going to do now? Or is it more like, sorry, your time's up, try this person now?
There's no exceptions. Only if we actually had to extend the service for over a month, but because she had a lease under her name, and they were fixing it, and they were having some issues with the apartment, but she was gonna get that apartment. That was the only exception that we made. Other than that, we just let them know, like, and we tend to remind them, like, there's 60 days left, and 30 days left, and then when the day is up, what happens is we provide a night at the hotel so they can figure things out.
In your experience, do you find that the safe house time gets them where they need to be?
No, it's not enough time. And out of 6 families, what I noticed, maybe 2 out of 6 families are able to move on and find a place. Most of the time they tend to return to the abuser, or try to find another shelter or find other resources in the community in other areas. Yeah.
So have any other family support system?
When they're from out of town, like in the area, no, but from my personal experience, not most of them don't. Yeah. How about your experience, Coco?
Yeah, most of them don't. They so we work intensively on finding housing, and it's one of the challenges here in the area, and trying to connect them with. We talk about, do you have any family members in the other areas that we can connect you with? We can ask and support you on transporting you there. What are the other options that you have in the maybe an RV, maybe like sharing rooms? We look into many ways of how can we get you housing, and we let them know before they come in, and we said, this is what you're getting into. This is a 90-day program. This is how we work. If we don't have a room secured after 90 days, we're going to ask you to leave. So they know that that we do that. So it's kind of like they chose. I don't know how to word this in a way that's like we try as hard as we can to
give them a heads up ahead of time.
Heads up ahead of time, as she said.
And like I said, like I had to ask a mom with 3 boys. One of them was 6 months, and it's one of the most difficult times, you know. But there's nothing that we can do.
I have like a two-sided question. Do you think that if the program was longer, say 6 months, that you would have a higher success rate, or that they would be more successful?
Honestly, I don't think so.
That was my follow-up question was, why not?
Yeah, I don't think so, especially because of housing.
Okay.
That's like that's the main reason. And then, like I said, childcare. It's really difficult finding affordable childcare, especially if they're barely starting to work, you know.
So it's not the amount of time, it really is just that this area is really difficult. Jobs and housing, I mean, I think we all understand that, but.
TRT tax.
Unless they go out of the area, like Roseville, down the hill, Sacramento, Reno, Carson City, the rent, it's way cheaper and there's more resources down there.
Do you guys take them to and from like Reno or any of these places if they want to go try and find a job and housing for, like say I'm leaving next week? You know, I really want to, I gotta go to Reno, try and find housing there, get a job there. Like, do they have some sort of help trying to do that?
Yeah, we do. We do transport them if they need. Like I said, like the appointments, like I pointed out. I've driven a mom around town getting applications, Craigslist. We tried as much thing as we can, and we don't. If they don't want to do it, I don't push them. I offer the support, and they said, okay, let's do this, and then I'll go ahead and support them with what they want, with what they.
Yeah, it's a tough job, man. I know, especially having a lot of them on drugs and coming from cycles of abuse that's been going on their whole life, and they're just trying to get out for a little while. It's like a little requiem, and they fall back into it. It's a tough place for you guys to be in, so I appreciate you guys doing what you do.
But now that you mentioned that, we tend to ask them about their if they have a current substance abuse, alcohol or drugs. Our shelter is a drug-free environment, and like I said, we have kids and we don't want to expose them to that. If they do, we don't discriminate about their abuse. We just want to know that way we can connect them with CORE, who's they have their own transitional housing as well.
You guys familiar with CORE?
No.
It's an
DUI class.
Yeah, it's they do DUI classes and they focus on drug rehabilitation. They have a not a shelter, but it's called T House, transitional house. So they help them through rehabilitation. I believe it's 6 months, where there's like a sober environment, and they teach them healthy ways to cope with substance abuse and things like that.
Is there a fee for that?
Yeah. There's a fee. I believe it's like 600 or something.
For the whole time or for
the room, I believe, a month.
Right.
And I think you guys are gonna have a presentation. I think you guys are gonna have a presentation regarding that program.
And that was CORE, C-O-R-E?
CORR.
And do you guys like merge to help like a woman, like if a woman is a drug addict and she's been abused by her husband, and like do you guys with CORE like reach out to provide help them together, or is it like you just send them to the drug? Sorry, because I like there could be kids in that situation. I mean, is that a sticky situation for you guys, or you just send them off?
I mean, most of the time they're gonna say no. So we are here to believe them, and then if they want to connect with other agencies, it has to be up to
So
them.
they just tell you they're not doing drugs to get the shelter.
Most
and the help. Right,
of
and
the
you guys
costs.
aren't gonna push it, you're just gonna, like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, so you do help them?
Mhm.
Great.
So do you do like drug testing at all?
No.
No, it's
A lot of,
illegal.
the 90 days can be enough for some people if they just needed some help,
Yeah, and then if they want to connect with us, we have to talk to the community member directly. So let's say an advocate or a volunteer, like, hey, my friend needs shelter or this and that, we need to talk to the community member.
I didn't ask Andrea the question, but has there been follow-up to see how many people successfully negotiate the transition and are able to establish some type of place to live, some type of work or whatever after they finish their 90-day program?
Yeah. I've been working here for 1.5 years. The mom that I was working with, I had to ask her to leave, and we got the news that she got her place to live with her kids, and so she's very resourceful. So, but I think most of them go back to the user, or we try to follow up with them and they fall off the map. So, but we do call them, and because we do have our follow-up procedure that we have, so we call them up and see if they successfully have obtained shelter or if they connected with other resources.
With transitional housing, we tend to follow up with them, but with the residential program, what they do is at the end, after the survey, they say if they want follow-up or not.
Oh yeah,
And most of the time they say no.
Right.
So.
Hearing that, it sounds like it's failing, but then it's also an abused person needs a few more chances, right? So you guys providing this is giving them an opportunity to see another way of living too, right? So it's like, wait a minute, so if they do go back, they can see that there's something else out there. Is that kind of how that works? Helping them eventually, hopefully, have a better life?
Well, as you know, it's up to 7 to 10 times when they finally realize that when they're ready to leave the relationship. So what we do is domestic violence at the very beginning, and they remember things, throughout their, if they return to the abuser, they remember.
So you do a class with them?
It's not a class.
Counseling.
It's kind of like case management. We have a booklet specifically for domestic violence, and we go over the power and control wheel, equality wheel, the 4 types of domestic violence, and all of that. And like I said, we tend to do it at the beginning of the meeting.
And I also provide parenting classes. I'm certified to give them classes for parenting for parent project book. It's ending destructive adolescent behavior. So I have individual classes with the community members who are in transitional housing, in the house, or in direct services. So I do offer those parenting skills or that support. Any other questions?
Is it a situation where you have to have someone at the house 24 hours from Tahoe Safe Alliance?
No, we don't. Like I said, it's just a small cabin, so there's no space for us. But what we do is I always check the shelter in the morning, and then Coco checks the shelter in the afternoon. So depending on how hectic is the house, because sometimes we have roommates having issues, so we have to stop by the house at different times during the day.
So it's you two guys?
Us two and our manager.
Sometimes we do cleaning, shopping, something breaks. It's like sustaining a home, so it's not just family. It's not just paperwork. It's other things that we have to take care of, cleaning bathrooms and you name it.
And is there always people coming at different times? Like, sorry, I didn't see you. Like a transition, like you may be new, and then next week someone else has moved out, or it's always a lot of transition going on.
Yeah, we had one community member who had, I think, 4 or 6 different roommates.
Right.
Because they were moving before their time was up and they were able to find housing or, you know, so forth.
Is there, like, can you guys assign like 2 family advocates to like one family? Or is it just one advocate per family?
It's usually just one advocate. Like I said, Coco, it works with the family. We tend to give him the family with the kids because he's certified for parenting classes. But you know, sometimes it's just whenever they come in. Because sometimes, you know, a person comes in and then, you know, next weekend is the other family's time to move out. But and then our manager does case management with them as well. So we spread out the cases, and then we also have different families in the transitional housing. So like right now I have 3 families.
Oh.
Yeah.
And also something that I think about, it's like, do you want to work with a man? So we give them an option of, you know, most of the harm, statistically talking, is done by a male. So I also be like, do you feel comfortable working with me? And if they don't, I don't take it personal. I'd be like, okay, here is another support.
How many of the, I know most of them are women, are employed? And do they go to their jobs from the shelter?
How many of them are employed?
Yeah.
Most of them are employed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're living in the cabin, but they're still going to their jobs.
It's a place to get away from the man.
Right.
We can't find that. So, right, we talked about that like the first week. That was it's not even a very old thing to offer.
And those are for cases locally, you know, like, but if they're from out of town, you know, that's part of their wish list of the things they want to do: find a house, find employment, and childcare. But they tend to.
So sometimes you get people, they move victims from out of town to you guys and just place them there. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I work with
like other government agencies or what? Like police stations, or who sends you
Like
these
sister
agencies?
organizations.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just to put some distance between them and the.
Because of safety, and there's small towns like that too.
So if you guys had some people that, you know, you come with jobs or still looking, have you guys ever had issues with a perpetrator trying to follow that victim back to the safe house? I would imagine from what, you know, they know the work schedule.
Yeah.
How often does that type of thing happen? It's a pretty easy place to find someone at their job.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I'm able to disclose.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I don't know if I'm able to disclose that much information, but it has happened.
But of course, yeah, of course.
Yeah. It has happened that where they being stalked and they follow back to the house
And then, I mean, they're not gonna tell us. You know, of course, they're not gonna say, hey, you know.
But why not? That's not their fault.
I know, but
They would have compromised everything.
They will put other people at risk. So let's say someone is being followed and they disclose it to us. What we do is just refer them to another shelter.
Oh.
And we have received community member calls from advocates saying, hey, you know, the abuser has located the safe house. Can you guys take this individual? That's what happens. If we know the abuser has found the location, we ask them for a release so law enforcement can be in the area, patrolling the area.
So in that case, you have your perpetrator there. You're in the business of prevention. Wouldn't you just say, come here, guy, I'm going to give you a hug and we're going to go talk and help that guy reform his behavior? You know, do you ever work with both sides?
We're not allowed to.
Unfortunately, our grants don't cover that.
It's all
Our grants only
voluntary,
cover
the whole program.
victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, not the perpetrator.
But the prevention part is covered.
The prevention part is covered for educating like the schools and you know, preventing that, but not for somebody that causes harm. It's already
Well, obviously, I'm saying.
Well, there's
obviously,
fear
such and
also,
such
like when they
22.
they're only gonna be in the shelter for 90 days, they're gonna see this person in their life again. There could be retaliation for putting a restraining order. Some people will take that like majorly, you know, like you put me in the way of the law. You know, come on, it's it's,
and
and it's
anything
all
can
fear
happen.
based to begin with. The whole reason it's there, it's like somebody, trying to be, it's just such a hard situation.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
It takes a lot of finesse to deal with it all, for sure.
It could be more harmful to do that than
Right, in the long run, right.
In the long run. So we let them decide if they do want to have, I forgot her name, the Native American advocate I was talking earlier, like she said, she was saying like, you could put their life at risk.
Yeah, especially in the Native community where they see each other all the time. Like they said, they got like 4 households. If the guy has to leave one household, he's probably going to be 2 houses away. Living still forever restraining order is a piece of paper. The police doesn't give you like a police escort,
There's no organization for the perpetrator.
No, unfortunately, no. And there's a lot of agencies who are working for that because a lot of abusers want the help. I have received several calls like, hey, my husband is trying to, work through his issues. Can you guys help us? I'm like, unfortunately, no.
And there's no organization to refer them to.
What I know, it's
like until you go into the system.
In the restraining order, there is a box that you can check if, let's say you get the restraining orders, it's something that you ask the judge to do to mandate batter's intervention.
Right.
That you can check there. But due to the grants and the nature of where we get our funding, we're not allowed to work with the perpetrator. There is a move called transformative action that is going on in the California Coalitions to End Sexual Assault, and where they're trying to switch the lens to treat the whole family and the perpetrator, and that it's, like you said, it's not that we're cutting just the weed from the top and it's just gonna grow back, right?
Yeah.
And the perpetrator is still probably abusing others, and because he doesn't get the help, and it's something that we get asked a lot, and we think about a lot too.
So I know I kind of asked this question earlier on that. It's like there's not a lot of free resources for the males, generally the males, who are the perpetrators. If they want the help and they're financially struggling, whatever's going on, you've got to go pay for this judge-ordered stuff, which is like $100 a pop or more, and there isn't much around currently to help, right? Versus for the victims there is. That's the first need.
For the perpetrator, if we do have a conflict of interest, we just, like we said, we just don't say we can't work with you. We try to nicely tell them there is this other organization like the Family Resource Center that might have parenting classes going on, that has a lawyer, a legal advocate, who we refer them to CORE, that have substance abuse. We just can't directly work with them, but we just kind of tell them, there's this other resources in the community that you could try out.
And there's partners who actually want to go to therapy. So if that's the case, either way, we are only allowed to pay therapy sessions for the victim, not as a couple.
Well, I've been in therapy before, and I've had my exes come in to a few of those sessions. So would that, if it was their individual therapist, but something like that, where you bring in, would that be okay? Because usually the therapists usually charge more if there's an issue between.
I mean, like I said, what the sessions that we pay for is just for that person.
Oh, okay.
And the therapists know that.
And,
okay. Well, yeah. I mean, well, she was just mine every now and then.
Yeah, but there's therapists who take couples, but they will have to pay for it. Yeah. Any other questions?
If you could have more safe houses, would you have a need for that?
I would say transitional housing. Like right after the program, like finding an apartment, like having our own apartment complex. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, Moonshine Inc. and Sierra Sun and the Truckee Town Council, almost every issue I read, every time I go to a council meeting, workforce housing is the biggest issue. And this is, to me, what this is about. So if the goal is to ultimately create an opportunity for people to be independent, that's really what you want, because if the perpetrator hasn't been rehabilitated, to send them back in now, we've already got the stats that that's not going to work. It's going to be a repeated type of offense. So I don't know, probably Paul Bancroft?
Yeah.
Hopefully he's gone to the mayor, the town council, but it's interesting because when I read these articles and I go to town council, it'd be interesting if some of them are sitting in here right now listening to this to think you have not an insignificant number of clients annually, according to the stat sheet, that are in this situation, that are in a worse situation than other people that aren't in this abusive situation trying to find housing. Might be interesting to take it to the next level up there and say, look, you need housing also for these people making the transition here, and really focus on that, because this has opened my eyes just being here a few weeks. Jesus, what a mess.
Yeah.
It's a crisis.
It's
It's a shocking crisis.
There's a whole ton of stuff about developers who come in.
Well, I know, they don't.
Because you can't travel across Martis Valley, you can't get to your jobs easily. There's not enough mobility you have emotional stifling from seasonal and
all these different things that people can't make changes very easily. So
It's a very hard situation if you're in this challenging, especially for those people who are struggling and who are in those situations. It's really hard. It's heartbreaking when you tell a mother with kids who's going in there you need to go out in the streets, or you need to exit our shelter, and we try as hard as we can to accommodate them, but the resources are just not there.
Do most of the people have their own cars who are in this area?
Domestic violence.
Do they have their own car?
Car? Sorry.
Sorry, guys.
Some of them do.
Some do, some don't.
Some don't.
Because to get out of here, you need a car.
Yeah, in a car. Our agency has a van, so we try to help them as much as we can to, if they want to buy their own groceries or they want to go to doctor's appointments, we drive them around. So, courts. We give them bus passes if we can. If the van is busy, we have bus passes. We have gas vouchers for emergency situations that we can provide to them as well.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Any tissue?
Thank you.